caterpillars, I hope you're all doing well at home. Okay, so I'm so excited about this week, about what we're baking together, because this is my favourite thing to make. We're going to be making some very traditional scones or scones. Some people say scones, some people say scones. I switch between the two depending on who I'm with. So what do you say? Do you say scones or scones? So I'm really excited because this is actually my secret recipe of how to make the best scones ever. Okay, so you are going to need 350 grams of self-raising flour, half a teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of baking powder, 85 grams of butter, 3 tablespoons of caster sugar, 175 millilitres of milk, 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, and 1 egg. Okay, so I've already tied my hair up this morning, but I am going to go and wash my hands, so make sure you go wash your hands with soap and then we'll get straight into making the scones. Okay, so the first step is going to be to preheat your oven to 220 degrees. Okay, the next step is going to be to measure out the flour, the salt and the baking powder. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my scales and I'm just going to start pointing the camera down so you can see exactly what I'm doing. Okay, so I'm going to start by measuring out 350 grams of self-raising flour. Make sure your scales start on 0 as always, as that's how you get the perfect amount of flour. So 350. Now you might use a spoon to do this, as that would make it actually probably a little bit easier. Nearly there. A bit more. Okay, there we go. There's my 350, and I'm going to sieve, using a sieve, into my mixing bowl. So I'm just going to pour that straight in like that. Now this gets out all of the lumps so you don't have a lumpy mixture. So I'm just going to go ahead and tap it very, very gently until all of the flour has gone into the bowl. Now if you've got quite a few lumps in there and they're not going through the sieve, what you can do is you can use the back of a teaspoon to get rid of all those lumps, which I think I might have to do in a minute. So I'm just going really gently so I don't get all of the flour all over the kitchen surface. Nearly there. Okay. Now, like I said, I'm just going to grab a teaspoon to make this a little bit easier. And I'm just going to use the back of it just to go like this. This gets all of the lumps and breaks them down so they can go through the sieve. Does make a funny sound. Does yours make a funny sound? Right. There we go. That's all my flour. Now, next thing I'm also going to put through the sieve is the baking powder. So you only need 1 level teaspoon of baking powder. There we go. Do the same again with my spoon. And I'm also going to add a teaspoon of salt, wherever the salt is. The salt is over here. Okay, so all of that is in my bowl. The next step is going to be to measure out the butter, which is 85 grams. Now, because we are making scones, what I find easier is to cut the butter up into cubes. So I'm first going to measure it and then I'm going to cut it up. So I'm just going to put this bowl over here and I'm going to grab my butter, open it up, and I'm going to weigh out 85 grams. Now what I find which makes the best scones is if you use real butter and not margarine. So I'm just going to cut, make sure my scales are on 0 and weigh out 85 grams. That was perfect, I promise. It actually says 85 grams first try. So that's really good. So I'm just going to wrap that up and put that over there for a minute. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a chopping board and chop up my butter into cubes. Okay, so remember when you are chopping up your butter to be really careful, especially if you're using a sharp knife. Maybe you can practice cutting the bits of butter in half and in quarters. Right, let's cut those up. You do want the chunks quite small, as this makes it easier to mix in with the flour and all the dry mixture in a minute. So that's it, making sure my fingers are out of the way, and I'm going to chop the butter like so. Nearly done. You'll probably feel the butter melting in between your fingers as you cut and begin to feel quite slippery. That's just because the heat from your fingers is melting the butter. There we go. Okay, so there's all of my butter cut up and ready to put into the bowl. So I'm just going to grab the bowl. Now this bit is going to be very messy and you are going to need to use your hands, just warning you. And it might take a little while, but you've got to persevere. What you're going to do is you're going to add your butter into the bowl and you're going to mix using your fingers and separate all of the butter and mix into the flour until they make sort of a fine breadcrumb mixture. Okay. Okay, so as you can see, all my butter is all rubbed in and it looks a little bit like fine breadcrumbs. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my sugar and I'm going to measure out 3 tablespoons. So let me grab out a tablespoon. Put 3 tablespoons in. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that's in here. And the next step is to measure out 175 millilitres of milk. So I'm just going to put my bowl over here and I'm going to grab my jug and measure out 175 millilitres. Okay. There we go. Perfect. Now what you are going to need to do is you are going to need to warm up your milk. Now I'm going to use my microwave and put it in there for about 30 seconds just so it's nice and warm. You can obviously tip this into a pan and cook it on the stove for a little bit till it gets warm. You don't want it boiling, but you do want it warm. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly go heat this up in the microwave and I'll be back in a minute. And I'm also going to mix in this bit of butter that I obviously left out. Okay. Okay, so my milk has just come out of the microwave. It's not too hot and not too cold, so that's perfect. So the next thing I need to grab is the vanilla essence or extract. So what I like to do is I'm just going to pour it into the cap. You might choose to use a teaspoon. I'm just going to pour it in to the milk. Okay. I'm just going to put this over there. Okay, so the next thing you need to do is you actually need to grab a baking tray and you're going to stick this in the oven. Okay, with nothing on, you're just going to stick it in the oven while you finish off making the rest of your scones. Okay, so my baking tray is in the oven. Now I really like fruit in my scones. Now some people don't, some people do, but I really like it, so I'm going to add some sultanas. Now if you do want to add fruit, I recommend about 300 grams, I reckon. So I'm just going to measure out 300 grams of sultanas and then add that into my dry mixture. Okay, so I've added my sultanas And what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to take a knife. Now you're using a knife, so please do remember to be very careful. And I'm just going to mix in the sultanas. So they're all covered with the flour, the baking powder, the salt, the butter, all mixed in. Now I know some people actually put chocolate chips in their scones. I've never tried that, but I really like fruit. Some people like them plain as well. They're still really tasty. Just mix it in. There we go. So my sultanas are all mixed in. Next thing what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually create a little well with my mixture if I can. So I'm just going to spread the flour and the dry mixture to the sides of the bowl. There we go. Making a little hole. And I'm going to grab my milk and I'm going to pour it in. There we go. Now I'm going to use my knife again to mix the mixture quite quickly all together. Now it will appear quite a wet mixture to start with, but don't worry, that is what it should be like. So all of the mixture comes together. So my mixture has come all together into the bowl. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of self-raising flour and I'm just going to scatter it on my kitchen surface. This stops our mixture from sticking to the surface. There we go. Okay. Right. Okay, so this bit is where you get a bit messy again. So I'm just going to fold over my dough on the floured surface a few times. Give it a little bit of a knead. There we go. Flatten it and fold it over. You might need a little bit more flour. So just scatter a little bit there. Just going to knead it a bit. I'm going to press it down and I'm going to fold it. There we go. And fold it again. Might do one more fold, and fold. Okay. So there is our scone mixture all together and ready to be rolled out. Now you can, for this bit, use a rolling pin. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to roll it out, not too thin, but about 4 centimetres. Okay, so I'm next going to grab my cutter and I'm going to create as many scones as I can out of this mixture. Okay, so remember, like I said before, it doesn't matter if you get a little bit of shell in there. If you do, you can just use a teaspoon and fish out the shell. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my fork and I'm just going to whisk the egg like that. Okay, so I'm next going to brush my whisked egg over the top of my scones. Now this makes them cook to golden brown and just gives them a really nice finish. So I'm going to put that on all of my scones. There we go. Like that. Oh, and the last one, got that one. So put some on that one as well. Okay, so next, you're definitely going to need a grown up to do this. I'm going to get my baking tray out of the oven and I'm just going to grease it very, very, very carefully. Please get a grown up to do this as it's going to be very, very hot. I'm just going to put a little bit of butter on the bottom of the baking tray. Okay, so please, like I said, get your grown up to do this as it's going to be very hot coming out of the oven. So as you're grown up, to put your scones on your baking tray. Okay, so my scones are all on my dry rack. They're golden brown at the top and I'm just going to put them there. Now what you can do is you can sprinkle a little bit of flour or icing sugar on top of your scones if you would like. Now I also like to eat my scones with jam and butter. I think that is so nice and they're so tasty. Now like I said, this is my secret recipe. Not even my family or friends know this recipe, but I thought it would be lovely to share with you guys. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope your scones taste really nice. And maybe I'll see you next time for another cooking video. Make sure you all take care, and I can't wait to see you all soon. You're all doing so well at home, and I want you to know that I'm so proud of you. Okay.